My name is Joanna Whitlock. I'm 68 years old, a retired high school literature teacher from Montpelier, Vermont. I'm a widow. I crochet. I drink chamomile tea, and I listen to Miles Davis when it snows. And on Christmas morning, all I wanted was to see my daughter. Not save her. Not make a scene. Just see her. The roads were half iced by the time I reached their town, 2.5 hours away. I hadn't told Anna I was coming. She hadn't invited me, but I'd knit her a soft lavender scarf, and something in my chest said, just go. So I did. I parked a few houses down. Didn't want to interrupt their Christmas with engine noise. I remember the box in my lap, tied with gold ribbon, the way my fingers trembled from nerves more than cold. I walked to the front porch. Lights twinkled. I could hear music through the door. Jazz, I think. Laughter. Glasses clinking. I knocked and waited. Nothing. I knocked again, gently. Still nothing. Just when I stepped back, ready to leave, I caught movement from the side yard. I turned, and my heart dropped. There she was. Anna, my daughter. She stood in the snow, hugging herself. No coat, no gloves. Just a thin dress, and a look in her eyes I hadn't seen since she was 5 and lost her teddy bear at the fair. Anna, I called out, taking a step toward her. She didn't answer. Her lips were blue, her cheeks flushed from the cold. I ran to her, dropped the box in the snow, and wrapped the scarf around her neck. She flinched at first, then melted into my arms like a child who hadn't been held in years. Mom, she whispered, barely audible. She didn't have to say anything else. I took her hand, walked up the porch, and pushed the door open. Inside, the house was warm, golden. The fireplace crackled. There was a large oak table beautifully set for 10. Everyone had champagne in hand. Laughter spilled like a fountain. Until they saw us. The music didn't stop on its own. Someone paused it. The talking ceased. Forks hovered mid-air. Anna's husband, Greg, was mid-toast. He lowered his glass. His father leaned back, eyes narrowed. Greg's mother looked at Anna like she'd dragged dirt into the room. No one said a word. That silence, it wasn't just awkward. It was cold, performative, like we'd just disrupted their perfect scene. I stood in the doorway, the snow still clinging to my boots, holding my shivering daughter by the hand. And I said 5 words. She's not standing out there. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the warmth like a gust of mountain wind. They stared at me, the woman in the doorway who didn't belong in their curated holiday. But I had already broken their illusion. Greg opened his mouth. Joanna, this isn't... I raised a hand. Calm, gentle, firm. I'm not here for you, I said. I came for her. Anna's hand gripped mine tighter. Greg's mother shifted uncomfortably. Someone set their glass down too hard. I saw a young woman at the table, maybe a cousin, glance at Anna with something close to pity or understanding. Maybe both. Still, no one moved. So I walked forward, slowly, still holding Anna. We passed by the fire, past the gilded decor, and I sat her gently on a love seat by the window. I pulled off my gloves and began rubbing her hands, warming them. She looked dazed, grateful, fragile. They just watched. No one offered a blanket. No one asked if she was okay. That told me everything I needed to know. Outside, the snow continued to fall. Inside, time felt frozen. And somewhere in that bitter stillness, I knew. This wasn't going to be just a visit. Something deeper had cracked, and I had just stepped into the center of it. After we sat down in that too-perfect living room, and Anna's fingers slowly thawed under mine. My mind drifted, as it always did, to how we got here. The first time I ever held Anna, she was so small I could fit her into the crook of one arm and still hold a book in the other. Even after Michael died, that's how I kept us going. Books and bedtime stories. Michael. He was my husband. A gentle, soft-spoken man who taught American history at our local high school for almost 30 years. He loved jazz records, old baseball stats, and blueberry muffins from that dingy bakery on Main Street. He also loved us, me and Anna, with a love so patient, it lingered long after he was gone. Cancer took him in late November, just as the snow began to fall that year. Anna was barely 5. I remember her standing by the window in her footy pajamas, asking why Daddy didn't come home for Christmas. I didn't have an answer. Only arms strong enough to carry her back to bed, and a heart breaking into pieces I wouldn't let her see. From then on, it was just the two of us. We didn't have much, but we had a rhythm. I taught high school English during the day and graded papers at night while Anna curled up on the rug with her own books, usually something way beyond her age. She loved stories, loved characters who came alive in the margins. When she was 8, she learned to knit by watching YouTube videos on my old laptop. That Christmas, she made me a scarf, mustard yellow with one end longer than the other. I still have it. The yarn's frayed, but every loose thread feels like a small monument to her childhood. She gave it to me with both hands and whispered, "So you stay warm even when I'm at school." Every winter since then, she's wrapped a scarf around my neck like it was a ritual. She'd fix my collar, adjust the knot, kiss my cheek, and then say something like, "Warm enough to walk through a blizzard, Mama." But this year, it was different. This year, I wrapped the scarf around her, and she didn't argue. She just stood there, letting me do what mothers do long after our children forget. We still know how. That shift, it unsettled me. I could feel it. Something broken beneath the surface. Something that had been cracking slowly, like a hairline fracture in porcelain, and I hadn't noticed until now. Maybe I didn't want to. I had spent so long trying to make her life easier that I never noticed when she stopped reaching back. After college, Anna struggled, as most do. Teaching jobs were scarce, rent was high, and the weight of student loans kept her up at night. I did what I could, even took on private tutoring sessions after I retired. And then, 6 years ago, I made a choice I never told her about. I sold the small acre of land my parents left me, just outside of Peacham. My mother had always wanted me to keep it, maybe build a cottage there someday. But dreams shift when you're a widow with a grown daughter trying to find her footing. I used every cent from that sale to help Anna and Greg with the down payment for this very house. Yes, this house. The one with the golden lights, the Christmas jazz, the tension humming beneath every clink of glass. I never told Anna where the money came from, just wired it to her account and said it was something I had set aside. I didn't want credit. I wanted her to feel safe. But watching her shiver on that porch, seeing how no one noticed she'd slipped away from the celebration, it made me wonder, had I given her a home, or had I handed her over? Greg always struck me as sharp, charming in the way some men are when they're used to getting their way. He called me ma'am too politely, smiled with his teeth but not his eyes, and made jokes about my quaint little Vermont novels. I didn't laugh, not then, and certainly not now, because I'd helped them build this life, and something told me They'd been planning to take more than they ever gave. I wish I could say Kyle surprised me, but he didn't. He stood at the edge of the living room that Christmas day, holding a glass of red wine with the kind of entitlement that only comes from men raised to believe they are the center of every room they walk into. His sweater was cashmere, the color of charcoal, and his shoes hadn't a speck of snow on them, though Anna told me they'd arrived just the day before. His parents sat on the cream-colored sectional, wine in hand, amused by the fireplace and the string quartet version of Silent Night, playing from their smart home system. When he saw me walk in, hand in hand with his wife, shivering and quiet, he didn't rush to greet us. He looked at me like I had trespassed into a curated magazine spread, like I didn't belong. Kyle's the kind of man who speaks softly but slices with silence. He doesn't raise his voice. He raises expectations no one else agreed to. Anna used to smile when he spoke. Now she watches him with careful eyes, like someone trained to anticipate a storm before the first crack of thunder. He said nothing as I helped Anna to the kitchen. Not even a Merry Christmas. That didn't surprise me either. Last Christmas, he gave me a gift, wrapped beautifully, with shiny green foil and a bow too big to be humble. He handed it to me with the smile of a man who thought generosity could be bought in bulk. Inside was a music player, cheap, outdated. I'd smiled politely, of course. I was raised that way. But when I picked it up, the price tag was still stuck to the bottom. Discounted. Half torn. $15 from a clearance bin. It wasn't the price. It was the effort, or lack thereof. I didn't say anything. I never do. But I kept it. Just like I keep everything that teaches me something. And this year, I brought it back. I had wrapped it in the same paper he used the year before, because I saved that too. I even used the same bow, a little wrinkled now, but still holding shape. Inside the box, next to the untouched music player, I placed a folded note that said, "I still remember." Even when I'm quiet, I didn't need to hand it to him. I left it under the tree with the rest of the gifts. Let the truth reveal itself in its own time. Kyle's family comes from a long line of people who believe silence is submission, that a woman's worth is in her ability to be pleasant and not take up too much space. Anna once told me that his mother called her a perfect choice because she was beautiful and knew how to keep her opinions to herself. I remember that line too. That was 2 Thanksgivings ago, before I stopped being invited. Kyle was used to controlling the room, the lighting, the dinner menu, the guest list, even the tempo of conversations. But that day, something shifted. Maybe it was the way Anna clung to my arm after we walked in. Maybe it was the faint tremble in her fingers when she held the teacup I made her. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the moment his father reached to turn the music back on. And Anna stood up, calmly, and said, "Can we not?" The music stopped, and Kyle didn't know what to do. He looked at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. But I knew that look. It was confusion, followed by fear. Because when silence is your weapon, a woman's voice becomes your greatest threat. I wasn't there to wage war. I was there to remind my daughter what home used to feel like. And maybe, just maybe, what it could still become. As Kyle returned to his wine and carefully sculpted smirk, I could feel the note under that tree growing heavier by the minute. Because people like Kyle believe in forgetting. And women like me, we remember. Quietly, completely. Sometimes it takes silence to hear what's really happening. Last summer, I had coffee with an old friend, Marilyn, a former colleague from the community college, where I taught English Lit for nearly 30 years. We hadn't seen each other in a while. Retirement had pulled us into different orbits, but we always found our way back to these quiet catch-ups. She was no longer in academia. Now she was a branch manager at a local bank, sharp as ever, a little more tired in the eyes, but still wore her conviction like armor. We talked about Anna that day. I remember the way Marilyn stirred her tea absently as I spoke. "So she's finally found a place of her own?" she asked. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Kyle's done well. It's a lovely home." Anna seems happy Marilyn didn't return my smile. She tapped her spoon against the cup, then paused. "Who's on the deed, Joanna?" I blinked. "The house?" She nodded. "Yes. Is it under Anna's name or Kyle's?" I hesitated. "It's under Kyle's." He handled the paperwork. Marilyn leaned forward slightly. "You sure about that?" I chuckled nervously. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm reminding you of what you already know." Her voice was calm but firm. "If you helped them buy that house, and I know you did, because you mentioned selling that plot of land, then you deserve some protection. Don't put your faith in sentiment. Protect your future. If not for you, then for Anna." She looked at me gently. "If you ever want to put a clause in quietly, I can help." "No one needs to know. I've done it for other women in your shoes." I shook my head back then, smiled politely. "I trust my daughter," I said. She'd never let me fall. Marilyn's face softened, not with agreement, but with something sadder. Understanding. "I hope you're right," she said. "But if you ever change your mind, just call." I never thought I would. But tonight, standing in this beautifully decorated dining room with polished glass and golden cutlery, I saw it all from a sharper lens. Kyle's father raised his wine glass with a smug smile as his wife chuckled at one of her own jokes. The laughter bounced off the marble countertops, loud and self-assured. Anna stood by the kitchen sink, hands deep in soapy water, wiping down the dessert plates. No one offered to help. No one even looked her way. My daughter, the one who used to read poetry aloud in the living room, now moved like furniture. Quiet, predictable, easily overlooked. I caught her eyes briefly. She tried to smile, but I saw it, behind that slight curve of her lips, an exhaustion too deep for words. Not just physical fatigue, something else. A shrinking of self, a dimming. And suddenly, it clicked. Anna wasn't ignoring me out of ungratefulness. She wasn't cruel. She was trapped, pinned between keeping peace in her home and honoring a mother who had poured everything into her. I saw the panic flicker in her eyes when Kyle barked for more ice. The way she moved faster, tighter. I turned away and reached into my coat pocket. My fingers wrapped around my old flip phone. Still worked. Still had Marilyn's number saved under M. I stepped out onto the back patio. The night air was cold but clean. I dialed. 1 ring, 2. Then her voice, familiar and warm, crackled through. "Joanna." I breathed in. "Do you remember what you offered me last summer?" A pause. "Yes," she said quietly. "Do you still mean it?" Another pause. This one, heavier. "I do." I glanced back through the glass door. Anna was drying her hands with a towel, looking down, shoulders slightly hunched. "I think I need that help now." Marilyn's voice softened. "I'm glad you called." I swallowed hard. I never thought I would. "You're not alone," she said. "You've just been quiet for too long." I didn't answer, just stared up at the stars. They looked farther than I remembered, but they were still there, still burning. And I realized, sometimes love isn't about staying silent. Sometimes it's about speaking just loud enough for the one who needs to hear it, even if that someone is you. Anna didn't cry when she saw me. She trembled, like a kitten caught in the rain, fragile, startled, drenched in a kind of fear that had no name. But every woman who'd ever swallowed her voice would know it by heart. I pulled her into my arms, quietly, and felt her shoulders stiffen before finally collapsing against me. She was taller than when she was little, but her bones still fit against mine in the exact same places. Her heart beat fast, disoriented. And then something strange happened. I felt myself trembling too, not from the cold, but from memory. I remembered shaking the same way, 36 years ago. I was 32, standing outside the hospital morgue, signing a paper I couldn't read. The man I loved, her father, David, had just taken his last breath, and I had to pretend I understood how to carry on without him. Alone. No roadmap, no backup plan. Only a toddler in my arms, and grief tucked in my coat pocket like a secret. I didn't tremble then because I was weak. I trembled because I realized I had to become someone I'd never met before. Someone who knew how to survive the impossible. And now, watching my daughter tremble the same way, I knew. She was surviving something, too. Later that evening, while the dining room echoed with the clink of dessert forks and the low hum of Kyle's mother recounting her trip to Monaco, I found Anna alone in the kitchen, her back to me, hands wet with soap suds, a mountain of dishes stacked beside her. The house was pristine. The food had been impeccable, and yet there she stood, like a servant in pearls. "Need help?" I asked gently. She didn't turn, just shook her head. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. Her voice wavered like porcelain on the edge of a shelf. "They hate surprises." I stepped closer, quiet, measured. "Then they've hated me for years," I said softly, placing a clean dish towel beside her. "Because I've always been a surprise." She let out a sound, not quite a laugh, not quite a sob, just something caught in her throat. "I just wanted to see you," I added. "I know," she replied, "but they think you're difficult." I let the word settle between us like dust. Difficult. That's what the world calls women who don't nod fast enough. I reached up and brushed a stray hair behind her ear, the way I used to when she was small and hated ponytails. "Do you remember," I asked, "the year you made me that red scarf for Christmas?" She smiled, faintly. "I sewed it by hand, with a tiny needle and no clue what I was doing." "You pricked your finger 6 times, I recalled, smiling, "and still finished it." She finally looked at me. Her eyes, hollow with exhaustion, softened just a little. "I wore that scarf until it unraveled," I said. "Every winter." Anna blinked back something wet. "I remember." I took her hand. "If one day your daughter was slowly being smothered, would you stand by and say nothing?" She froze. The plate she was holding tilted slightly under the faucet. I didn't repeat myself. I didn't have to. Because that question, quiet as it was, landed like thunder in the hollow space between us. That was when I saw it. The flicker of recognition in her face. The unspoken truth she hadn't dared name. Her marriage wasn't a partnership. It was a performance. And she'd been cast as the compliant wife in a script she never wrote. I squeezed her hand. Just once. Then let go. And walked out of the kitchen, In the hallway, I passed the ornate mirror Kyle's mother insisted on installing. I caught my own reflection, just for a moment, and saw something unexpected. Not a woman being silenced, but a woman remembering her voice. I turned back, glanced toward the kitchen where Anna still stood, frozen in thought, and whispered under my breath, "I'm still your mother. And I still remember who you are." Because silence is not surrender. And love, real love, doesn't always speak in shouts. Sometimes it just stands beside the sink, asks the right question, and leaves the door slightly open for the soul to breathe. That night, while they laughed and opened their gifts, I sat on the edge of the couch with the envelope in my lap. It was the same envelope I'd kept in the inner lining of my coat pocket since I arrived. I hadn't planned on using it. Not at first. I had hoped, foolishly perhaps, that just being present would be enough to remind them of something. Of me. Of us. Of the years I gave so freely. But seeing Anna scrub dishes, while the rest sipped wine, and joked about my coat's scent, lemon and old books, I knew silence had lived too long in this house. I stood up slowly. My knees don't forgive as quickly as they once did. I walked toward Anna, who was wiping down the granite counter. Her shoulders were curled in again, spine bowed not from age, but from habit. She didn't see me until I was right beside her. I placed the envelope beside the sink. She looked at it, then at me, confused. "It's not a gift," I said softly. "It's correction." Before she could respond, a sharp voice rang from the living room. "Kyle." "Oh, what's this?" Another surprise from the woman who doesn't understand boundaries? He strutted toward us, glass of bourbon in hand. His tie hung loose now, his sleeves rolled up, performing his usual brand of artificial ease. He snatched the envelope before Anna could react, tore the flap open. I didn't flinch. He scanned the first page, then narrowed his eyes, voice rising. "What is this?" Anna stepped closer. "What does it say?" I answered for him. "It's a legal transfer." "The house is now in your name, Anna. Sole ownership, effective immediately. Witnessed and notarized." Kyle scoffed. "You think you can just march in here and play queen of real estate? This isn't some little sewing circle, lady." "I'm not playing," I said, "and I'm not a lady." He looked up, smirking. "Oh, trust me, we noticed." The room fell quiet. Even his mother paused mid-sip. Anna's face was pale, eyes darting between us. Her hands trembled, not in fear, but something else. Something dormant waking. Kyle waved the papers in the air. "This is void. You can't just—" "Yes," I cut in. "I can." He stepped forward. "You don't make the rules here." "No," I said, calm as dusk. "But I can correct a mistake. That deed had my name because I paid for it. But I shouldn't have tied my daughter to a house built on control. This puts it where it should have been all along." Kyle tore one side of the page. And that's when Anna moved. She lunged forward, snatching the papers from his hand. Her voice, God, her voice rose, clear and sharp like sleet on a rooftop. "Touch it again, Kyle, and don't expect me to be here tomorrow." He froze. Everyone did. Anna stood tall, taller than I'd ever seen her, shoulders straight, chin up, not a tremble in sight. Kyle blinked, then tried to laugh, but the sound caught awkwardly in his throat. "Babe, no," she said. "Just that. Number." Then quieter, almost to herself, "I watched you humiliate my mother. Again and again. And she never said a word. But now I understand why she came." Anna looked at me, and the gratitude in her eyes made my chest ache. "You did this for me." I nodded. I should have listened sooner, she whispered. Kyle stepped back, looking suddenly small in a room he once owned. His father muttered something about drama and reached for more wine. But the moment had cracked something permanent open. I turned to go. "Where do you think you're going?" Kyle barked. I smiled. Back to the inn I booked myself into, since I wasn't expected here. But don't worry, I'll sleep well tonight. Kyle opened his mouth, but his wife, his quiet, invisible wife, had already turned away. She picked up the contract, walked to the mantel, and slid it behind a photo of their wedding. A new landmark, one of choice, the kind that mattered. And as I slipped on my coat, I touched the inner pocket where the envelope had been. Empty now, but not me. Not anymore. They thought the house was the only surprise I came bearing. They hadn't the faintest idea. That evening, after Kyle's shout had turned the room stiff and brittle, after Anna stood her ground with trembling knees but unbroken eyes, I let things settle. I waited. Kyle stomped off into the den. His mother made some excuse about needing tea. His father followed, eyes narrowed. But I could feel them watching, measuring, guessing what move I might make next. I stayed in the kitchen with Anna. We didn't speak. The sink dripped once, twice. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out the second envelope. "What's this?" she asked, her voice still small, still afraid it might shatter something if raised too loud. I smiled and gave it to her. "Your real inheritance. And your freedom inside was more than just paperwork. It was the quiet culmination of a lifetime." My husband, God rest his patient soul, had worked modestly all his life. But he read. He studied. And in 1983, he started quietly investing in tech stocks, long before the rest of the world even knew what Apple or Microsoft meant. He never bragged, never made big moves, just consistent ones. We didn't spend lavishly. We lived in our modest home, drove the same car for 15 years, packed our lunches. People assumed we were scraping by on teacher salaries. But after he passed, I didn't sell. I didn't cash out when things got exciting. I waited. I sat with my grief and my spreadsheets, and I let it grow. Compound interest, my husband used to say, is quiet magic. And he was right. Anna unfolded the documents. I watched her eyes move over each page. Brokerage accounts, trust details, deeds, insurance policies, all shifted into her name, with legal stipulations to protect it from being co-managed, claimed, or leveraged by a spouse without her consent. She looked up at me, bewildered. "This can't be real." "It is," I said. "It's been real for a long time. I just waited for the right moment to hand it to you." Kyle must have heard. He reappeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "What now?" "Another stunt?" I turned toward him calmly. "If calling my lawyer to transfer legally documented assets to my daughter is a stunt, then yes. I suppose I have good timing." He scoffed, but it was his mother's voice that broke the air like a hammer on glass. "Excuse me?" she said, storming in from the hallway. "You? A retired public school teacher? Are you telling me you had this kind of money all along?" I nodded once, eyes steady. "That's correct." Her husband followed, clearly rattled. "How? How does someone like you—" "Someone like me?" I repeated slowly. Then I smiled, gently, because I lived humbly. But I wasn't stupid. The room went very, very still. Kyle looked between Anna and me, like the floor had shifted beneath his feet. So, you've just been hiding wealth? And now what? You're throwing it in our faces? I turned back to Anna. My husband and I built this not to throw it around, but to make sure our daughter, our only child, would never be trapped. Not by grief, not by fear, and certainly not by any man. Anna's hands shook slightly as she clutched the envelope. Mom, you'll need to go through all of it carefully with a financial advisor. There's a list of trusted names inside. I've set things up so you'll have full control, and no one can legally override it without your signed personal consent. Not even me. Kyle laughed bitterly. You think money makes you smart? No, I replied, but it gives my daughter a chance to breathe. That's more than enough. His parents stood frozen, their anger muted by disbelief. Anna looked like she might cry again, but not from fear this time. From release. From knowing she had choices now, that she had a key in her hand no one could steal. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I couldn't save myself back then, but maybe I can help you choose a different story. I didn't look at Kyle again. I didn't have to. The numbers were louder than anything he could scream. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, after the laughter and clinking glasses, after Kyle's parents had retreated to the guest suite, and after the kids were tucked in with sugar still on their lips, there was a knock on my door. Soft, hesitant. I knew it was her before I opened it. Anna stood there in her old pajamas. Her hair was tied back loosely, no longer styled the way Kyle liked it. She looked younger somehow, more like the girl who used to curl up on our porch swing with a Nancy Drew novel. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded and stepped aside. We didn't say much. She walked straight to the window and pulled back the curtain. Snow was falling again. Gentle, thick flakes swirling under the streetlight. The kind of snow that made everything feel like a secret. I joined her at the window. Then, I reached into the drawer of my small overnight bag and pulled out a pair of mittens. Faded, hand-stitched, clumsy. She gasped. "These, you made them," I said softly. "You were in 7th grade. Said you wanted to keep me warm on yard duty." Her hands trembled as she took them. "I didn't think you still had them." "I kept everything," I whispered. "Every crooked card, every spelling test you aced, every note you passed me under the dinner table when you wanted dessert before vegetables." Anna clutched the mittens to her chest, and then, like a dam breaking, she cried. Not the quiet, graceful kind. No, this was raw, ugly, beautiful. "I don't know who I am anymore," she choked. "I wake up and it's like there's this weight on my chest before I even get out of bed." Kyle decides what we spend, where we go, how I speak to his parents. I didn't even want a Christmas party. I sat down on the edge of the bed and reached for her hand. "He controls everything," she continued, "even my voice. I'm just an echo of what he wants." I squeezed her fingers gently. "You still have your voice, Anna. You've just forgotten the sound of it." She blinked at me. "Remember that poetry contest you won in 9th grade?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "You read your poem in front of the entire school." Hands shaking, voice cracking. "But you did it. You made people cry. That girl is still in there." "But what if it's too late?" she whispered. "It's never too late," I said. "Not for daughters. Not for mothers." We sat in silence for a while. Then I stood and pulled on my coat. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Come with me," I said. Out on the porch, the snow was deeper now. It covered the garden path like a white quilt. The air stung our cheeks, but we stood there anyway, barefoot in boots, wrapped in silence. Anna's breath came out in soft clouds. "I wanted to say thank you," she said, "for the house, for the stocks, for not yelling back at Kyle." I shook my head. "That wasn't a gift. That was course correction. I gave you what was always yours." Then I turned to her, more serious than I'd been all day. "This is the last time I come uninvited, Anna. I won't force my way into your life again. The next time I come, it'll be because you called for me." There was a long pause, the kind that holds 1,000 truths. She looked up at me, eyes glassy, heart trembling beneath the surface. And then, in a voice so small I nearly missed it, she said, "Can I call you now?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded. We stood there in the snow, mother and daughter, the night wrapping around us like a lullaby. The door behind us stayed closed. The world, for once, felt open. The next morning, we didn't speak much. No yelling, no crying, no dramatic declarations, just quiet. Anna and I rose early, before the frost had melted on the window panes, before the house had begun to stir. Kyle had already left for work, his leather shoes echoing across the marble floor just before sunrise. His parents, mercifully, were still asleep. Anna moved like someone who had already mourned and was now simply clearing the ashes. She packed with calm hands, folded clothes, closed drawers, unplugged chargers. I followed her lead, helping only when she glanced at something and nodded. One by one, we dismantled the curated life she had been forced to live. No arguing. No bitterness. Just two women, mother and daughter, gathering themselves. Her bedroom, once decorated in neutral tones Kyle insisted on, became bare within an hour. No framed photos of their wedding. No throw pillows that matched his mother's taste. Just cardboard boxes filled with the fragments of a life she had pretended was hers. It wasn't running away. It was returning. Anna didn't take much. A few suitcases, a jewelry box, a folder with important documents, and Emily's backpack with the little unicorn charm still swinging from the zipper. We didn't talk logistics. We just moved. But there was one witness. As we carried the last box down the staircase, a small voice interrupted us. "Mom?" We turned. Emily stood at the landing in her pajama set with pink snowflakes, clutching a stuffed bear to her chest. Her hair was a sleepy mess, her eyes still adjusting to the light. Anna crouched down immediately. "Hey, baby. Did we wake you?" Emily shook her head. "I heard you packing." There was a pause. Then she looked at me, and she said it. "I heard Dad say no one needs you, Grandma." "But I do," I stood frozen. Anna's lips parted, but no words came. I took a slow step forward, knelt down so I was level with her. "You heard that?" I asked softly. Emily nodded, bottom lip trembling. I reached out and tucked a stray curl behind her ear. Then I whispered so gently she had to lean in to hear me. "Then maybe someday you'll call me. And I'll come." She wrapped her little arms around my neck, and I held her tight, feeling her heartbeat against mine. Fast, fragile, real. We didn't need a goodbye. Just that moment. 20 minutes later, we were on the road. The car was filled with the smell of pine from an old air freshener and the warmth of 3 thermoses of coffee we'd brewed in silence. Emily sat in the back, drawing in her sketch pad with crayons she found under the seat. Anna stared out the passenger window, her face pale but steady. No one said much. And then, as we crossed the state line into Vermont, Anna whispered, "Thank you for not saying, 'I told you so.'" I smiled. You were the one who had to tell yourself. She reached over and placed her hand over mine on the gear shift. We didn't cry. We didn't need to. The house I brought them to wasn't grand. It was an old cedar cabin tucked in the hills near the edge of town, with a wraparound porch and wind chimes that hadn't been tuned in years. The steps creaked and the roof needed patching. But the moment Emily ran up to the door and shouted, "It smells like cookies in here!" it became home. I had already made the beds, put out fresh towels, stocked the fridge with juice boxes and almond milk. It was the kind of preparation only a mother does. Quiet, thorough, expecting nothing, hoping everything. That night, as I watched Anna curl up on the couch with a blanket that once belonged to her late father, and Emily fell asleep beside her with her bear tucked under her chin, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not the kind you fight for, the kind you come back to. And for the first time since arriving at their mansion 4 days ago, I exhaled completely. Our days began to stretch. Not rush, not collapse, just stretch. Like dough being kneaded softly into something warm and whole. It had been 3 weeks since Anna and Emily moved in, and our little cedar cabin in Vermont began to breathe like a home that had waited too long to be lived in. Mornings started with coffee on the porch. Anna took hers with almond milk. I liked mine black. Emily always had hot chocolate with little marshmallows I kept hidden in the top cupboard, just for her. Anna began teaching again, but this time online, on her terms. She set up a corner of the dining room with a standing desk and ring light, and for the first time in years, I saw her talk about literature with joy instead of obligation. I'd pass by as she lectured about Toni Morrison or Mary Oliver, and there was something soft and grounded in her voice I hadn't heard since before her marriage. Emily enrolled in the little school down the road, where the principal knew every child's name and every parent's story. She came home with paint-streaked hands and stories about maple syrup science experiments, and a girl named Sasha, who had the coolest purple glasses. As for me, I didn't want to sit still. I opened a small knitting circle at the community center. Nothing grand, just a folding table, a big thermos of chamomile tea, and extra needles for those who forgot theirs. I called it Loops of Grace. No fee, no sign-up, just chairs and yarn and stories waiting to be unspooled. Older women came first, widows, grandmothers, some who had moved up north after losing partners, or pensions, or both. Then came younger women, too. Mothers needing a moment. Caregivers needing space. One woman, Linda, came straight from the hospital still in her scrubs, her fingers too stiff to knit, but not too tired to sit beside us. They didn't come for the patterns. They came to breathe. One Tuesday afternoon, as I poured tea for a woman who hadn't spoken in 2 sessions, she finally said, "You remind me of my sister." She was quiet too, but she always knew what to do. I smiled, and I said, "People think rescue is loud. Sirens, flashing lights, headlines, but sometimes it's just placing a bowl of warm soup in front of someone before they realize they're starving." The woman stared at me, eyes suddenly glassy, and she whispered, "Thank you." That night, Anna handed me a notebook, old leather cover, pages still blank. "You might want to use this," she said, "or I'll start if that's okay." I nodded. 2 days later, I opened it and read her first entry. My mother never raised her voice. She never struck back, but she made terrible people look at themselves in the mirror. She did it with a gaze that never flinched, and somehow That was worse than shouting. She didn't rescue me like a movie heroine. She just opened her door and let me walk in. And that, I've learned, is the rarest kind of power. To be still and to be ready. I'm beginning again. I think she knew I would. I closed the notebook and placed it on my nightstand, next to my knitting basket. The fire in the hearth crackled low. Outside, snow had begun to fall in delicate flurries. I watched it coat the porch swing, the rosebush still clinging to its last stubborn bloom. Peace doesn't arrive with trumpets. Sometimes it tiptoes in while you're folding laundry, or slicing apples, or listening to the sound of your granddaughter laughing from the next room. It doesn't ask for attention. It just takes root. And I let it. It was a Thursday, the kind of day where clouds hung low and soft, like wool waiting to be spun. I was kneeling by the garden bed, planting a new line of lavender. Anna was a few feet away, her hands buried in the dark soil, transplanting white tulips. Emily sat on the porch swing, legs crossed under her, reading Charlotte's Web aloud to no one in particular. We had found a rhythm, a silence that wasn't empty, but full. That's when I heard tires crunching over the gravel driveway. I looked up and saw a black SUV, polished, expensive, out of place against the rustic quiet of Vermont. It came to a stop just outside the gate, and for a moment, no one moved. Then the driver's door opened. Kyle. Behind him, the passenger door opened. His wife, Amanda, stepped out, high heels clicking against the stones like sharp punctuation. And then, another door opened. His mother, the one who had once looked at me like I was dirt tracked across her marble floor. Now they all stood there, unsure, awkward, looking through the iron gate as if it were a wall they couldn't scale. Kyle stepped forward. Anna kept digging. Emily kept reading. And I stood slowly, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked to the edge of the garden, just close enough that we could meet eye to eye without crossing into old habits. Kyle cleared his throat. I just wanted to talk. I nodded once. Then come around the side, I said. Out back, I'm planting something that listens better than people do. He blinked, not sure if I was joking. I wasn't. He glanced toward the porch, perhaps expecting the door to open to be invited in. It didn't. Anna didn't even look up. Amanda shifted beside him, arms crossed, face tight. Kyle's mother whispered something sharp under her breath, and I saw Amanda's jaw tense. Kyle tried again. Anna. She stood. Her gloves were still on, fingers caked with soil. She took a slow breath. I heard you, she said. Her voice was calm, measured, not angry, not afraid. I heard everything for 6 years, every excuse, every apology, every promise to be better. Next time, she took one step forward. But now, I don't want to hear. I want to live. Kyle's face crumpled for a second, just long enough to show the boy underneath the man he pretended to be. But only for a second. He turned away, jaw clenched. Amanda muttered, "She's being dramatic." But it sounded like a child trying to stay proud after dropping an ice cream cone. Kyle's mother wasn't so subtle. Ungrateful little... But before she could finish, Emily rose from the porch. She stepped forward, holding something folded in her small hands. A knitted scarf, pale green, a little uneven but clearly made with care. She stopped a few feet from them and looked directly at Kyle's mother. "My mom made this," she said quietly. "My grandma kept it." Then she turned slightly to Kyle. "And now, I get to keep it." None of them spoke, They weren't angry anymore, just irrelevant. That's the thing about harm. It thinks it leaves quietly, but sometimes it oversteps so far that, by the time it turns around, the people it tried to break are already blooming without it. Kyle glanced at me one more time. You told her to hate me. I met his eyes. Calm, steady. No, I said. She had to love you too long to stop on anyone else's terms but her own. He looked down, and then, like a gust of wind that realizes the house won't open its door, he left. One by one, they piled back into the SUV. Doors slammed. Engine started. But the house stood still. And so did we. I woke early that morning, earlier than usual. The sun hadn't broken past the ridge yet, and the house still wore its blanket of silence. Outside, frost kissed the window panes, and inside, the kettle hummed softly as I filled it. But my hands weren't busy for tea. They were busy with words. In the corner of my bedroom, tucked inside the oak dresser that once belonged to my mother, was a stack of blank stationery. Cream-colored paper, the kind that smells faintly of cedar and old promises. I pulled out a sheet, sat at the writing desk, and picked up the fountain pen I hadn't used in years. I wrote slowly. Dear Anna, I won't send this. Perhaps you'll never read it. But I need to write it anyway, because sometimes love is quieter when left unsent, like roots growing underground. If someday you find yourself shaking, your hands, your heart, your voice, remember this. You once stood outside in the snow, trembling but unbroken, cold, wet, shivering, but alive. You were never weak, even when the world tried to convince you that you were. Pain tried to own you. Control tried to name you. But you are not a thing to be owned, and your name is not theirs to speak. You carry your light inside, and no one, no man, no mother-in-law, no cruel voice inside your head can control the flame. Only you. Even on the dimmest nights, the fire is still yours. I folded the letter gently, smoothing it once with my hand. I didn't sign it. She'd know it was from me, if the day ever came. I walked to the bookshelf in the living room, reached behind a row of old vinyl records, and pulled out the small wooden box Kyle had once called junk. Inside, it was the old portable cassette player, my Walkman from the 80s. It had taken me weeks to repair it, to find the right belt, the right screws, the right batteries. But it worked now. It was mine again. And for the first time in years, it was whole. I opened the back, tucked the letter inside, and closed it with a quiet snap. Then I set it on the windowsill, just above the kitchen sink, where the light always landed in the afternoon. That's when I heard soft footsteps behind me. Emily, still in her pajamas, hair messy from sleep, rubbed her eyes and looked at the cassette player. You fixed it? I nodded. Yes. She walked closer, reaching out but stopping short of touching it. Are you going to give it to someone? I smiled. Yes, but not yet. She tilted her head. Why not? I crouched beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. Because the right person needs to hear their whole song before they're ready to hold the player. She looked confused for a moment. I tapped her chest gently. Our stories are like songs, full of verses, some sad, some brave, some still being written. Until someone learns to hear every part of theirs, they're not ready to carry someone else's truth. She nodded slowly, her fingers still near the Walkman. Will I get to hear my song someday? I looked into her eyes, soft and full of wonder. Yes. One day you'll hear it so clearly, you'll wonder how you ever missed it. And when you do, I thought, that little cassette player and what's inside it will be yours. But for now, it would sit on the windowsill beside a little ceramic owl Anna made in second grade and a tiny potted rosemary bush we were trying to revive. Quiet, waiting, like all things worth passing down, like love that knows when to speak and when to wait. A year can change everything. The frost was gentler this December. The sun rose just a little earlier, spilling golden light onto the snow-covered lawn outside my kitchen window. Inside, the smell of cinnamon muffins filled the house. Anna had baked them from scratch, her hands steady, her humming soft, calm. There was no tension in her shoulders today, no apology in her presence, just warmth and joy. We were all getting ready for Emily's school assembly. She had been chosen to deliver a speech at the winter honors ceremony. The principal said she'd written something honest, heartfelt, and surprising. I hadn't asked what it was about. I wanted to hear it fresh, just like the rest of the room. The auditorium was packed. Parents, grandparents, students shifting in metal chairs. The kind of gathering where the air buzzed with pride and nerves, and everyone whispered too loud, trying not to. Anna and I sat near the center, hand in hand. Her palms weren't cold anymore. That used to be a small thing. Now it meant everything. Then they called Emily's name. She stepped up onto the stage, her dark green dress swaying gently around her knees. She wore the little owl pin on her collar, the one from my windowsill. Her voice, when it came, was steady and bright. The theme this year is Unsung Heroes. We were asked to write about someone who made a difference in our lives, not with grand gestures, but with quiet strength. She paused, looking at the paper in her hand, then lifted her gaze. My hero doesn't wear a cape. She doesn't fly or fight dragons. She doesn't even raise her voice. She knits. There was soft laughter from the audience. My grandmother, Joanna, is the kind of person who can fix anything. Not just buttons or cassette players, but hearts. And not by telling you what to do, but by sitting with you while you figure it out. My throat tightened. Anna's hand squeezed mine. But she's not the only hero in my story. Emily's voice softened, but grew in power. For a long time, I thought silence meant peace. That if someone stayed quiet, everything was okay. But I was wrong. Silence can be a cage, a shadow, a lie we tell ourselves to keep the peace that's not real. She looked out across the room, and for a moment, I felt her eyes meet ours. My mom used to be quiet. Too quiet, but she's not anymore. She speaks now. About her joy, about her pain, about what she needs. And I've learned that speaking up doesn't make you difficult. It makes you free. There was a hush, the kind that carries more weight than applause. Emily breathed in, steadying herself. I have two heroes. One who knits strength into sweaters. One who found her voice after forgetting it. Both of them remind me that bravery isn't loud, it's honest. She stepped back from the podium, a little shaky now, her hands finally trembling just a little. But I could see it clearly. Those tremors weren't fear. They were the echo of power. The crowd clapped, then stood. Anna turned to me, eyes glossy with unshed tears. Her lips parted, but I spoke first, whispering into the moment. You're not trembling anymore. Anna smiled, her voice tender, but firm. I have my voice now, and I know how to use it. We sat together in the fading light of the auditorium, hands clasped, hearts open. Around us, winter still held the earth in its arms, but inside, something had shifted. A thaw, a beginning, a soft, steady flame. The living room was quiet when Emily placed the scarf into the glass frame. She handled it gently, almost ceremoniously. Her fingers brushed the worn stitches like they were sacred text. "It's not just yarn," she said softly, mostly to herself. "It's a relic of 3 generations." She stepped back, admiring it, not for its craftsmanship, which was simple, but for the story it carried. Her eyes glowed the way they did when she read a good poem. I stood beside her, watching her reverence. That scarf had seen everything. My hands made it. My mother's voice shaped it. And Emily, she gave it meaning I never knew it had. It now hung above the mantel, in a walnut wood frame we had polished together. The small brass plate at the bottom read, "For the hands that mended and the voices that rose." Life had changed in the past year, not in grand cinematic sweeps, but in the quiet revolution of ordinary days. And Anna? She was no longer hiding behind silence. She'd opened something remarkable. A small community class at the local library for women who'd been financially manipulated or controlled. She called it Ledgers and Voices. At first, I thought the name was odd, but once I sat in on a session, I understood. It wasn't just about math or money. It was about reclaiming worth. Anna stood at the front of the room, her stance calm and firm. A whiteboard behind her was covered in colorful markers: green for assets, red for debt, and blue for boundaries. She talked through budgeting, but wove in deeper truths between numbers. How to recognize manipulation when it's disguised as help. How to separate guilt from gratitude. How to say no without explaining. The women in the room weren't frail. They weren't broken. They were quiet power, stirring awake. I sat in the back, listening. Not to instruct, not to correct, but to witness. When the session ended, one of the younger women asked Anna how she learned all this. Anna glanced at me, then smiled. "My mother taught me most of it without even realizing. The rest came when I finally listened to myself." The girl nodded, eyes wide, then hugged her binder like it held the blueprint to her freedom. After the others filed out, I stayed seated. Anna sat beside me, unscrewing the cap off her thermos. "Mint tea," she offered. I accepted, warming my palms around the steel. "I didn't think I'd be able to do this," she admitted. "For a long time, I thought helping others meant you had to be completely healed yourself." "You don't," I said, sipping. "You just have to be willing." Her eyes flicked towards the mirror on the far wall. Long, rectangular, old. The kind of mirror that doesn't flatter, just reflects. She stood and walked over to it, tracing her fingers over the silver frame. "I avoided mirrors for years, Mom," she said. "Every time I looked, I saw a girl who didn't fight hard enough. Who let too many things slide." I rose slowly, joining her. "But lately, I see someone different. Someone who didn't just survive, but shifted the story for her daughter. And for mine." She touched her reflection gently, like meeting herself again for the first time. That night, back, home, I couldn't sleep. I wandered into my sewing room, once cluttered with yarn and thread, now quiet, almost sacred. I sat at the small vanity table where I used to untangle skeins of wool. My own mirror stood before me, curved at the top, dusty at the corners. For a long moment, I just looked, not to judge, not to correct, just to see. My hair, silver as ever, coiled neatly into a bun. My cheeks, a little softer now, carried the lines of laughter, of grief, of waiting. My eyes, They weren't sharp or piercing. They were calm, still, present. And then, suddenly, I saw her. Not just me, but her, my grandmother, in the tilt of my smile, in the gentle set of my brow, in the softness I had never allowed myself to wear until now. I whispered, without knowing I would. My grandmother used to say, "Women aren't weak. They're just waiting to be heard." And finally, I believed her. It was Christmas again. The world outside my window was blanketed in soft white, just like it had been the year before. But everything inside the house, inside me, was different now. Quieter, brighter. That morning, I found a letter in the mailbox, wrapped in crisp cream stationery. No return address. Just one name written on the envelope in slanted, familiar handwriting. Kyle. I stood by the window for a long while, letter unopened in my hand, the cold seeping through the glass and into my fingers. It wasn't anger that filled me. It wasn't grief. It was something far quieter, more resolute. Emily peeked over my shoulder, curious. "Who's it from?" I didn't answer. I walked to the fireplace, lit a single match, and set the envelope to flame. It curled in on itself, paper blackening, words never read. When it was done, I took the ashes outside to the garden. The roses had withered for the winter, but their roots were still alive. I knelt by the oldest bush, planted by my mother when she first bought this house, and gently sprinkled the ashes into the soil. Emily stood behind me, watching. "Grandma," she asked quietly, "why didn't you write him back?" I brushed my palms together, then stood. The sky was turning gold as the sun hit the frost-covered trees. "Because forgiveness doesn't need words," I said. "It only needs peace." She nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure if she understood. But she would. One day. Inside, Anna had set the kettle on. The scent of cinnamon drifted through the kitchen, where ginger cookies cooled on wire racks and candlelight danced on the countertops. She'd made me a sweater. Soft, thick, pale blue. It fit perfectly. The yarn was warm against my skin, but what warmed me most was knowing her hands had made it. I slipped it on. Later that afternoon, we went out to the garden, as we always did, even in the snow. Emily wrapped herself in her little red coat and cradled our cat, Mr. Peaches, in her arms. Anna brought the watering can, even though she knew the ground was too cold. She said the act mattered more than the result. We moved slowly through the yard. Anna spritzed the rosemary bush with melted snow water. Emily chased a robin that landed on the fence post. I settled into the wooden bench under the arbor, the one my husband had built with his bare hands 40 years ago. Its paint was chipped now, and it creaked when I sat, but it held. It always held. I watched them. My daughter, my granddaughter. One laughed gently. The other whispered to the cat. Their joy was quiet, unforced, real. I thought of the years I had wasted trying to patch holes in people who didn't want to be whole. The love I gave Kyle, it had never been small, but it had always been conditional, on his terms, not mine. It wasn't my job to chase him anymore. It was my job to stay, to root, to grow. We stayed out there as the sky turned lilac and the first snowflakes of the evening began to fall. Emily giggled when one landed on her nose. Anna turned her face upward, letting flakes settle on her lashes. I smiled. I hadn't just gotten my house back. I had gotten myself back. And I hadn't done it with noise or confrontation. I hadn't done it with bitterness. I had done it with stillness, with boundaries. with choosing what deserved to stay and what I had to let go. The final snow came heavier, blanketing the lawn in white velvet. We didn't rush inside. Not this time. We let the cold kiss our skin. We let the silence wrap around us like an old friend. And when we finally stepped back indoors, cheeks flushed, hearts full, I glanced once more at the window behind us. The street was empty. No one waiting. No one knocking. No one yelling to be let in. Just the garden. Just the snow. Just peace. I looked at Anna, at Emily, at the pale blue sweater over my shoulders, at the life I had chosen, finally chosen, for myself. And when the snow fell that night, no one stood outside anymore.